What's up, guys? This is Alex from Double Move Sports, back today with another perfect off-season breakdown video. This is a new series I started where I take a team, I look at their free agents, I look at guys that could be on the open market in free agency from other teams, and then I look at their draft capital, look at potential trades, things like that. And I basically put together what would be the perfect off-season for this specific organization. Last week, I was able to get into the New York Jets. It was a lot of fun. Check that one out if you haven't already. Today, I'm getting into the Cincinnati Bengals, but before we get into it, hit that like button, hit subscribe, comment down below which team you would like to see me break down next. But let's hop in. First things first, it's easy for the Bengals. I mean, Zach Taylor should be back as the head coach. If that changes, it's going to be a surprise to me. Hopefully it doesn't. Otherwise, the whole first part of this video is going to look invalid, but all signals have pointed towards Zach Taylor getting another chance with his young franchise quarterback who should be healthy next season, Joe Burrow, and some of the pieces that he's got around him. So the first thing we're going to do here's kind of how we break it down. We look at the chronological order of the offseason. So first we'll look at the Bengals free agents and who they could re-sign, who they could let go. Then we'll kind of look at the open market, what positions should they address, what players could be there, and then we'll look at the NFL draft. Throughout, we're going to identify potential trade opportunities if it makes sense for their perfect offseason. But that's kind of how we do it. We go through it in chronological order and see what makes sense. So first, we're going to look at the Bengals free agents. There's a long list. You can't get into each and every player, but I really just wanted to call out the keys here. On offense, you got A.J. Green, John Ross at your skill positions. No running backs. I think like Samaje Perine was going to be a free agent, but we're going to pass on some of the backups like that. I know he had some good games there in 2020, but Joe Mixon should be back. Giovanni Bernard will be back. On the offensive line, Alex Redmond, who is a starting guard, is set to be a free agent. And that's really it on the offensive side of the ball. I know the Jets that I did last week had a ton of offensive pieces that were shuffling. Bengals, not so much. On the defensive side, it's a lot more interesting. You got Mackenzie Alexander and William Jackson at cornerback, Sean Williams at strong safety, Josh Bynes at inside linebacker, a 99 tackle, so close to that 100 tackle club last season, and then Christian Covington and Carl Lawson on the D-line. So I don't want to break down each and every player here. I want to keep it simple. So first we'll just look at the offense. I think Alex Redmond on the offensive line, they need to let go. That line was brutal last year outside of Jonah Williams, did not have a ton of continuity. I think he's someone you can let walk, try to address it in free agency and through the draft with younger talent, maybe more proven talent. And then A.J. Green and John Ross, they got to let him go. A.J. Green, not a very inspiring effort there in 2020, had his flashes, but I have a lot of questions on whether he has the potential to be the player that he used to be. So for the price tag he's probably going to demand, I think the Bengals should go ahead and let him go. John Ross as well. He's a guy who was involved in some drama, demanding trades. That one's obvious, a first-round pick, high draft capital, as much speed as you can have, 4.2 40, but he just never really panned out with the Bengals. Had flashes, but never was really used in the role where he wanted to be used. Never really saw that Tyreek Hill potential with a speedster. So I think all those offensive guys should go. You look at this team, Joe Burrow at quarterback, Joe Mixon at running back, Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins at receiver, Drew Sample at tight end. You got a pretty good core there. C.J. Uzomah should be back at tight end as well. Now, defense gets a little more interesting. I think of all those defensive names I listed, I think Mackenzie Alexander you can let walk. William Jackson at cornerback, I would love to see the Bengals bring back. Josh Bynes at inside linebacker, I'd love to see them bring back. Carl Lawson on the defensive line, I'd love to see them bring back. I'll flash those names on the screen, their positions, and who's going to be staying and who's going to be leaving on that defense in this scenario. So really the reason I think Christian Covington can go off that D-line is Geno Atkins and DJ Reader should be back from injuries. Atkins, a veteran whose production has fallen off a little bit, but hopefully if we make some of the improvements we'll see later, Atkins can have a good rotational role. DJ Reader as that run stopper should put them in a pretty good position at defensive tackle. So I think Covington can go, and with Mackenzie Alexander, I know he got a lot of run last season, but Trey Waynes at the cornerback spot will be back in 2021. That was their big offseason splash signing last year. Never played a snap, tore his pec before the season. That was a 3-year, $42 million deal. So they're going to get Trey Waynes back, immediate impact player on the defense, which should help that unit a lot. Also, if we're looking at additions that are coming back into the fold, you got Waynes on the defensive side of the ball, but then on offense, it's obvious. You got Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Jonah Williams, all going to be back and healthy. Joe Burrow could start out on the pup, but right now he expects to be ready for week 1. So for all intents and purposes, this is the perfect offseason. We're going to assume Joe Burrow is back, Joe Mixon is back and healthy, Jonah Williams is back and healthy, and then, as we mentioned, Trey Wayne's on defense. So already getting some health to this roster with some talented players is going to help them tenfold. So next, let's go ahead and look at free agent targets. I look at this team, and there's 3 main areas where I think they need help. I mean, they need a lot of help. But in free agency, I would love to see them, 1, go after the offensive line. Their offensive line ranked 30th in 2020 per Pro Football Focus, 30th out of 32 teams. Jonah Williams was the only one that graded out decent. The rest of the line was rotating throughout the season, no continuity. Joe Burrow got absolutely pummeled when he was in there. So offensive line is a big one in both free agency and the draft. Obviously, earlier we said A.J. Green and John Ross were going to let go. So that means they need another receiver. Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins are great, young pieces. So I don't think you need to go out and make a splash signing. It's going to be potentially a loaded free agent class. Chris Godwin, Kenny Golladay, Allen Robinson, Will Fuller, Juju. All these guys are set to be unrestricted free agents. I'm sure a couple of them will hit the open market. I don't think you need to go that far, but I think you could sign a veteran guy who could be your wide receiver 3, really help out Joe Burrow, help out this team. And then also they need a game changer on defense. I mean, Geno Atkins' production is falling off. He was that game changer before. And there's going to be a lot of good pass rushers that we'll get into here in a second. So first, let's start at the wide receiver spot. 3 names really stick out to me. Someone to complement Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. It's Marvin Jones from the Detroit Lions, Will Fuller from the Houston Texans, and Sammy Watkins from the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Why would we want Sammy Watkins on the Cincinnati Bengals? He's constantly injured. Does he really have anything left in the tank? We're just looking for a veteran guy to help out this offense. He doesn't have to be, some alpha wide receiver who's going to get 1,000 yards on this team. So for now, I'm going to push Sammy Watkins to the side because, the injury risks probably are too much for the Bengals to handle when they want to develop Joe Burrow. And then Will Fuller, I think we're going to push to the side as well. One, I expect Houston to bring him back, at least if they bring Deshaun Watson back. I know right now, at the time of this recording, there's some weird Watson rumors going on, so it'll be interesting to see whether or not they do get everything cleared up with Deshaun Watson and they want Will Fuller back. I think they certainly do need him in that offense along with Brandon Cooks, but we'll see. And we'll push him aside just because it's going to be too big of a deal. They don't have really the money to pay him right now. They have projected $35 to $50 million in estimated cap space. I think that's important to mention as well. So if it's at the top end of that, maybe they could go out and get someone like Will Fuller as a splash signing to go with Boyd and Higgins. But for this case, we're going to say no. But the name I'd really like to see the Bengals sign is Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones is 31 years old. He's a proven veteran. He's had 9 or more touchdowns 4 times in his career. This past season, another really strong season, over 900 yards and 9 touchdowns. So when you look at Marvin Jones, 1, he was drafted by Cincinnati. He played there before. It makes sense. 2, it's just a veteran guy that can come in and give you another red zone presence on this team. You look at T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. They can certainly get it done in the red zone. But Marvin Jones, as a big body, high point, jump ball type of threat, he can come in and be your wide receiver 3. Doesn't have to play every single snap. Play a really strong rotational role and help out this team. Be a veteran for T. Higgins in that locker room, be a veteran for Joe Burrow. Give him a really, really good, strong weapon to throw to that complements T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd well. So I would love to see Marvin Jones on this team. To have Marvin Jones, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins, I think would be really interesting with Burrow at quarterback and Joe Mixon at running back. So we'll lock in Marvin Jones there at receiver. And next, let's move to the offensive line. They do have, 4 spots they essentially need to fill. Probably not going to be able to fill all of them with splash signings and high draft picks, but we'll lock Jonah Williams in at 1 tackle. And we're going to go ahead and sign a guard in free agency for the Cincinnati Bengals. Brandon Scherff from Washington and Joe Thuney from New England are both set to potentially hit the open market. Here, we're going to keep it simple. Sign Brandon Scherff from Washington to a pretty big deal and lock in a solid interior lineman for this Bengals team, establish a really good run blocker, and start to build some continuity in this group and some consistency for Joe Burrow. Now, next on the defensive side of the ball, we already mentioned Trey Waynes is coming back from his injury last season. We said they're going to bring William Jackson back as a cornerback, so no splash signing needed. We will address that in the draft later on. But as far as a playmaker on the defensive side of the ball, I would love to see the Bengals go out and get a pass rusher. Last season, Carl Lawson was the sack leader for this team with 5.5 sacks. That is terrible. They need an identity. They need someone who can make these game-changing plays and make 1 to 2 plays a game that just totally swing the momentum for this defense. So a lot of potential pass rushers on the market. Matt Judon, Bud Dupree, Jadeveon Clowney, Shaq Barrett. I don't know how many of them will actually hit free agency with their teams not re-signing them. But the guy that intrigues me is Leonard Williams from the New York Giants, 26 years old, 11.5 sacks last season. Would be a pretty big contract, but I think that's the kind of guy that they could sign, really get an impact pass rusher on this defense. We already said they're going to bring Carl Lawson back, hopefully on the other side of the pass rush, and get a nice 1-2 punch going there in Cincinnati. Then you can bring Geno Atkins in, and maybe he'll have more success now that you have several threats on the D-line. Leonard Williams just makes a ton of sense for this team. And if he ends up not hitting the open market, maybe some of those other names could land in Cincinnati. But we're going to go ahead and lock in Leonard Williams. So far, I mean, Marvin Jones, Brandon Scherff, and Leonard Williams are the big free agent signings for the Cincinnati Bengals. And last but not least, let's move on to the NFL draft. The Bengals, we're only going to talk about really their day 1 and 2 draft capital. That's the first 3 rounds. So, they could end up hitting on some guys rounds 4 through 7. But as far as immediate impact players, we're going to talk rounds 1, 2, and 3. The hit rate for rounds 4 through 7 is just a little bit lower. So we look at their key draft capital. They have pick 5 in round 1, pick 38 in round 2, pick 69 in round 3. So we have a chance to bring in 3 guys who can help this team immediately. And in round 1, at pick 5, I think you have to hone in on Penei Sewell from Oregon, offensive tackle. There's a lot of quarterbacks in this draft, so I'm hopeful that Sewell can fall to number 5 to the Bengals. There's a chance that the Dolphins could take him at 3 if they decide not to trade back. But I actually think with the deep QB class, with guys like Jamar Chase in this class as well at the wide receiver spot, there's a good shot that Sewell falls to the Bengals, which would be a perfect fit. So with this being the perfect offseason video for the Bengals, we're going to go ahead and assume that Sewell falls to number 5 and the Bengals are able to scoop up a beastly offensive tackle out of Oregon. So now you have Sewell on one side, Jonah Williams on the other, Scherff in the middle, and things are really, really coming together for this offense. So we'll lock in Sewell there. And if there's no Sewell, Sam Cosmi from Texas, Elijah Vera Tucker from USC, 2 other options on the offensive line that the Bengals could probably get if they traded back in the first round, pick up some more draft picks. But for the purpose of this video, locking in Penei Sewell with that 5th overall pick. Now we look to round 2, and I would love to see the Bengals pick up some defensive back depth. We talked about Waynes and William Jackson back as the starters in this scenario, but they do need a strong third corner and some depth at the position. There's a couple names here: J.C. Horn from South Carolina, Shaun Wade from Ohio State. I think Shaun Wade from Ohio State would be a great pick, more of a developmental guy, but he could play a role in his rookie season, be a rotational guy with upside in the future to turn into a really strong starter. So we'll go ahead and lock in Shaun Wade, help out that secondary. And then in round 3, we're going to go back to the offensive line. That's the recurring theme here. You have to protect your franchise quarterback. Otherwise, you could pull an Andrew Luck after 10 years if you've been beat up time and time again. So the Bengals need to understand that and protect Joe Burrow. So we're going to go with an offensive guard. Ed Ingram from LSU is the pick here. A great run blocker. He's very, very talented, but some off-field issues could actually make him fall to round 3. So they could be really getting a late round 1, early round 2 steal here in round 3 because of some off-field issues. Obviously, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes with this guy. Some interviews that they conduct with him could reveal some things. So for those purposes, though, we're going to go with Ed Ingram for his talent from LSU. And if we look at this draft class, Penei Sewell at tackle from Oregon, Shaun Wade at cornerback from Ohio State, and Ed Ingram at guard from LSU. So not a bunch of splash skill positions like we had with the Jets. Go back and watch that video if you would like to see some of that. Quarterbacks, running backs, receivers flying off the board. But here we just get some really, really solid core pieces to help this team, because when you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, the skill positions look great. Burrow, Mixon, Higgins, Tyler Boyd, a really strong young core there with Zach Taylor as the head coach. They just need to get that offensive line in order, get some depth in the secondary, get some depth at wide receiver, and then also find a stud playmaker on the defensive side of the ball. So really quickly, let's recap some of the key moves here. So the players that are going to be departing from this Bengals offense: A.J. Green, John Ross, Alex Redmond at guard, Guys departing from the defense, Mackenzie Alexander, Sean Williams, and Christian Covington. Key re-signings are going to be Josh Bynes, William Jackson, and Carl Lawson. And you also get Trey Waynes back from an injury last season. We move forward to new acquisitions, and you have Marvin Jones, Brandon Scherf, and Leonard Williams in free agency. With that $35 to $50 million in cap space that they're going to have, might need the upper end of that to get all three of these guys. And then in the draft, Sewell from Oregon at offensive tackle, Sean Wade from Ohio State, and Ed Ingram from LSU. So, guys, that kind of wraps it up here for the Cincinnati Bengals. Let me know what you think. Let me know if the Bengals did pull off this offseason. How many games do you think they'd win next season? Would you do anything differently? I want to hear it all in the comments. Also, be sure to like and subscribe and let me know which team you would like to see me break down next. But again, this is Alex from Double Move Sports, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.